Hello, everybody. I'm Drew Duncan with Sync 57 Sports, and this is the Sync 57 Sports Show. Just when you thought the CFP could not make people even more upset than they did, we are now holding their beer, bro. And this is the best way that I can accurately assimilate to you exactly why the hell the fans are as upset as they are. I went over to a friend's house last night to go wrap gifts. And we were all hanging out, wrapping gifts. And we were watching, because I wanted to watch football. And I was like, hey, do you mind if I turn on the Florida game? So I had that on the TV. And then I had the Cincinnati-Tulsa game on my phone. Okay. And I'd been watching football all day long, and understand these are people who don't really give a damn about football. They don't. Okay. And so they're asking me all these questions, and I'm explaining the CFP to them and all this kind of stuff, how it works and yada, yada, yada. And very literally one of them, who I know for damn sure doesn't watch football at all, said, well, then why even play the games? Do you understand? That's why it's such a slap in the face to the fans who this year, with the way things are at home more and probably watching more so now than ever. I mean, seriously, think about it. We are way more involved on so many levels now than we probably ever have been before. And you have the nerve to look into that camera and explain to me how Notre Dame, with only one win over a ranked opponent, who, by the way, North Carolina, I think, 3 losses this year, 3 losses, right, is basically the equivalent of Texas A&M beating Florida with their one win over a top 25 team who ended up not being really all that great and having not really as close a game as they tried to make it out to be against Alabama. All right. And you tell us that one team is justified, the other team is not. Then you basically threw the Big Ten a bone by saying, well, we don't want to tell the Big Ten what to do, and we're not going to make any presumptions, but a conference championship is really going to help you out. Knowing that, hey, that's the wink, right? We're winking at you. Go ahead and fix that rule really quick so that way we can get your Buckeyes in. And anybody who's watched Ohio State play against Indiana, Northwestern, who have really solid defenses, just not really the best offenses, you're going to sit there and tell us, hey, those 2 wins over those 2 top 25 teams are really impressive, but not for Louisiana Lafayette, who beat Iowa State, right, and was still ranked 13 spots behind them going in to this weekend. And you said, well, it's based off of the way that Iowa State is playing now, even though not only did Iowa State have more losses, so by ranking Louisiana Lafayette lower, you basically told them that win doesn't even really matter because for whatever reason you're justifying it. And we can't even say it's strength of conference because that only worked in the Big Ten this year, but it didn't work in the SEC. We can't say that it's strength of schedule because that didn't work out for Texas A&M, but somehow it did for Notre Dame. So it's just this revolving door. And now you move Oklahoma up 4 spots after they beat Iowa State and didn't even really finish the job. And there are a lot of people who will tell you that the officiating in that game was really bad, and it was. Now, it ended up being bad on both sides of the coin, but it was a horribly officiated football game. And so what we're trying to figure out is exactly what do you mean? And so eventually what we just go ahead and figure that you mean is you have these teams that you like. that you're always going to like, and everybody else is just kind of like there and it's whatever. Because we've already seen this before, where the committee jumped Ohio State from 6 to 3 over Baylor, over TCU, right? Jumped them all the way in. You had Ohio State sitting at 4 for weeks while they weren't playing. But when Cincinnati wasn't playing, you kept dropping them further and further and further and saying, well, we just don't have enough of a resume. But they played more games. So you have more of a resume. You can't cherry pick is what we're saying to you, and that's exactly what you're doing. You're telling us that one win over a top 25 team with Texas A&M was good enough to be 5. But you're also telling us that the 2 wins that Coastal had over top 25 teams, who beat a team, Louisiana Lafayette, who beat Iowa State, that was ranked way ahead of them, and then that win over BYU you said was no good either, even though you had BYU ranked, I think it was 8 at that juncture. And then you said, well, that's just a suspect loss now for BYU, right? And if Coastal would have been able to play Lafayette this weekend and won that game, that would have actually given him 3 wins over top 25 teams. But for some reason, Notre Dame's really one key win on the year over Clemson was good enough, even though they turned around and really got dominated by Clemson in the ACC championship game. You said, well, that one loss really just doesn't even matter. So you basically knew what you were going to do going into this weekend regardless. The only thing that you were going to do was, if Clemson lost, go ahead and back them out because they're a 2-loss football team and go ahead and swing in Texas A&M. That was really the mindset going into this weekend without even really watching and evaluating the games. Because if you watch Ohio State play Indiana, if you watch Ohio State play Northwestern, and you tell me that you think that they can hang with Alabama, then you are sadly mistaken. And somebody's going to go, well, you know, Ohio State had guys out, da-da-da-da-da. This season is so unpredictable. Every season is unpredictable. Injuries happen. Suspensions happen. Wins get taken away. Teams get investigated and can't compete in bowl games. Every season is unpredictable. You still have to win when you're on the field, and you have to be impressive. And there was nothing impressive about that Ohio State win over Northwestern. Because if Northwestern had half the offense of an Alabama or an A&M, they would have beat Ohio State by 30. The same goes for Indiana, who had a damn good quarterback. Too bad he got hurt. The next week, that is. You know, it's a damn shame because really Northwestern and Indiana basically have championship caliber defenses. And then to top it all off, you're trying to tell us that basically those wins over Indiana and Northwestern mean that the Big Ten have a great strength within their conference, but Penn State was 0-5 before they even won a football game. How good was Rutgers, Michigan State? Look, going into Ohio State and Indiana, between those two teams, their opponents had a combined win record of 5. 5. They had more turnovers in that game at that time between those two teams than their opponents had wins. And you're going to tell me that with the Big Ten, it's the strength of those 2 wins over top 25 teams, but not for Carolina Coastal, who beat somebody that's in the, quote, Power 5 conference. Why don't you just be a man and come out and say, we're not giving anybody outside the Power 5 a chance? This is not about the best 4 teams in the country out of 131. This is about the best of 5 teams within the Pac-12, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. Those are the teams that we will always favor because Oklahoma is sitting at number 6 with more losses than Coastal and BYU and Cincinnati combined. So get real is what we're saying. And just admit what you really mean. Stop trying to gloss it over with fuzzy terms, with fuzzy words. We're not buying it anymore. We don't care anymore. You know, and you've got people saying, well, go back to the BCS. Well, that didn't work either. Ask Boise State. Ask Utah. Ask TCU. That didn't work either. Just admit that you're not going to give anybody else a chance. Why doesn't the NCAA just go ahead and say, hey, look, we've got our Big Five, we've got our Power Five conferences, and everybody else that's already in another conference, we're not going to move you to another conference. We're not going to ask any conferences to do an invite. What we're going to do is just move you down to Subdivision 2, dude, because you don't belong here. It's your fault for going to Cincinnati and Alabama. You weren't really good enough to go to Alabama. That's why you're at Cincinnati. That's what you're saying. That's what you might as well do. Because I don't see any other way that this is justified. Because it's not. No matter how you slice it, none of this is justified. It's a revolving door. Don't tell me North Carolina is that good of a football team. They beat a very overrated Miami team. Very overrated. You rank these teams every single year. What was it, a couple of years ago? Wasn't there like 7 teams from the SEC that were all ranked? By the end of like the 3rd or 4th week, there were like 3 or 4 left because everybody else was dropping like flies. Every year we have to watch Tennessee start in the top 25, only to barely finish 500. Every year we have to go through this. Just doesn't make any sense. And by the way, as far as I remember, the coaches still vote on the national champion. Man. I'm Drew Duncan with Sync 57 Sports, and this was the Sync 57 Sports Show.